Okay. Should be back soon. Okay. Hey, I guess you're here already. I'm here waiting for you. Oh,
Morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Summer is here. Now officially, summer is here. I mentioned it to Robin on the way in. I like the way that Gary phrased it in the bitterness of the winter when our heaters weren't working, and he said, well, at least we're not burning up because summer was so hot last year. But we're going to be burning up again when we go outside. We are blessed to have air conditioning and heating and all of that sort of thing. It is a great blessing to have. We are in the book of 1 Kings. 1 Kings, and we are in chapter 11. We're going to finish chapter 11 at this point. Chapter 11 is a pivotal part of this book. Solomon will die at the end of it, and his reign, and basically 11 is setting up chapter 12. The reasons why chapter 12 happens the way that it happens. The writer is very good at putting in backstories and relating back to parts of 2 Samuel and I think it was Genesis actually, concerning some of the other tribes and what's going on. And then we start trying to look at the division of the tribes and when the split happens in Israel, and it's a little bit confusing, but I think when the Jewish people read it, they understood what it meant. So I don't think there was any problem on their part. So chapter 11, I think we all know, it starts talking about the issues with Solomon and his inability to withstand the influence of idolatry. And, the writer phrases it was the influence of his wives. But ultimately it was the influence of idolatry itself. He couldn't resist it and allowed it. I don't know that he did it himself so much, but it was everywhere. And God was not happy about that. So what we're going to see, like the division of Israel itself, Judah and Israel, we saw that happening way back in the time of David and Saul. And so many things happen that are just mind-boggling to me, politically and tribally and all these different things. We know that the house of Benjamin, because they lost Saul as king, was very bitter towards David, but we're going to see that there's an alliance. And we don't even hear about Simeon. Where is Simeon? What's going on with all these different things? And there's this call back to Deuteronomy 17, where God says, don't go back to Egypt because I got you out of there. And what is the first thing we read about? Well, Solomon marries one of the daughters of Pharaoh. So that's one of the first things we read about. And then we're going to see all these kooky other political things happening with Egypt and the Pharaoh, even though Solomon has this wife that he has to give special provisions for because she is an Egyptian. And all of these things are kind of swirling around what's going on in not only with the king, but in the kingdom itself. All of this is from God. The division is because God is unhappy with their idolatry. And when you look at the Old Testament, it's kind of this recurring theme over and over and over again. You just go back to Judges, you see that happening. And there's this thing that I see where there's a lot of things that we can do that God is not happy with, but He can find provision we can find provision with Him to find redemption. But when it comes to idolatry, there's just nothing He can do about it, and it just is. There's nothing he just. That's where He draws a line, and this is what He's doing with them. So we're not going to read verses 14 through 25, although we will finish what we started last week on that. So before we begin, let's have a word of prayer. Gracious Father, thank you, Lord, for loving us. Thank you for establishing the body, that we can be here together and that we could open your word and learn from it. We ask and pray that all things we do at this hour would be in accordance with your will. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, so we talked last week about the different types of idolatry that was going on. It's all so nuanced, depending on what region you went with. People would pick up different idols and assign different things to them. So it gets really complicated, but basically it was really messed up because it was just evil the way things went. It was all very paganistic and, child sacrifices, all these horrible things. More importantly, it doesn't give glory to the real God, Jehovah. And, and we talked a little bit about how it is that even today, idols are everywhere, even though they don't have a representation like a big statue or something. Okay, so we did read through verses 14 through 25, and this is the writer setting up chapter 12. He's basically saying, everything, the land was peaceful. In other words, there were no major wars. But Solomon was not without enemies. So he talks about Hadad of Edom. And you can see, I think there were some 18,000 Edomites. Now, Edom they're the relatives of the Jews, right? They came from Esau. But God projected or prophesied about what was going to happen as far as Edom is concerned, that they would be like this. They would be rebellious. So Hadad was in there. He fled to Egypt. So that gives us this Egypt sort of connection. Here's this enemy of Saul. He's living in Egypt. And he becomes the Pharaoh loves him so much that he says, my wife has a sister that you should marry. And he does, and he goes and he lives with Pharaoh, and eventually Hadad says, look, he learns that David dies. And he says, I want to go back to my country, which tells us he's going to go back to reestablish the Edomites. And it's interesting to see that, because right after it's this whole thinking that Solomon's not going to do anything to me. So he's going over there to make trouble for Solomon. And again, here is Solomon's father-in-law, if you will, allowing it. And Solomon obviously didn't say anything or do anything. He just probably felt like, well, that's business, nothing personal. And then this other enemy, Rezon, who was, and these are from the conquest of David's time. Rezon, he's up in the Syrian area, which is north of everybody, in Samaria type of area, Damascus. And so he's an enemy of Solomon the whole time that Solomon is king. Okay. Samuel 8 recounts David's conquest of the enemies, and some of it's very brutal. I think it's 2 Chronicles that talks about the Benjamites being or the Edomites being wiped out, some 18,000, and Joab was looking to kill every male. It was really, really brutal. So if you wanted to read that, that really brings to the forefront what people are thinking, why they hate Israel so much. Okay, so let's get into verses 26 through 40. Anybody want to make any observations before we move on from here? Okay, you know what? I'll go ahead and read this note that was in the book. It says in verses 27 and 28, the writer of 1 Kings displays a peculiar way of pointing out the cause for Jeroboam's rebellion, and it's in the next chapter. Though it is not directly stated, it is possible that Jeroboam and the labor force of the house of Joseph were not happy spending their time building and repairing cities within Judah that did not pertain to their own tribes and territory. Jeroboam was then ripe for the encouragement given him by the prophet Ahijah, which we'll read in the next chapter. So let's start there, chapter 20, or verse 26 of chapter 11 of 1 Kings. Then Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zerdah, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also rebelled against the king. Now this was the reason why he rebelled against the king. Solomon built the Millo and closed up the breach of the city of his father David. Now the man Jeroboam was a valiant warrior. And when Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he appointed him over the forced labor of the house of Joseph. So there was this sort of tax where you were conscripted to work. It wasn't the same as the slaves, the forced slavery. It came about at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him on the road. Now Ahijah had clothed himself with a new cloak, and both of them were alone in the field. Then Ahijah took hold of the new cloak, which was on him, and tore it into 12 pieces. He said to Jeroboam, "Take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will tear the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon and give you 10 tribes. But he will have 1 tribe for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel. Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Shemos, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the sons of Amnon, and have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and observing my statutes and my ordinances, as his father David did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life. For the sake of my servant David, whom I chose, who observed my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom from his son's hand and will give it to you, even 10 tribes. But to his son I will give 1 tribe, that my servant David may have a lamp always before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen for myself to put my name. I will take you, and you shall reign over whatever you desire, and you shall be king over Israel." He says, I will do this. God is saying he's doing this. Then it will be that if you listen to all that I command you and walk in my ways and do what is right in my sight, by observing my statutes and my commandments, as my servant David did, then I will be with you and build you an enduring house as I built for David. And I will give Israel to you. Thus I will afflict the descendants of David for this. But not always. Solomon sought therefore to put Jeroboam to death. But Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt of all places, again, to Shishak, king of Egypt. And he was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So here's this Egypt connection again. And it's really, I mean, I think, I'm just saying it because I think Solomon kind of opened that door to go back there. And it was, it's very unfortunate because the king, even though he has this association with Solomon, sees fit to go ahead and just play both sides and, oh, you're an enemy? Okay, whatever. Okay. So what is the reason, I guess, why is Jeroboam going to be unhappy in the next chapter? That was the note that Barry put in there. Basically, it's just this. Solomon is doing all this building in Jerusalem and, little anywhere else as applies to Jeroboam's own homeland. And he seems to be upset about it. And he seems to hold a grudge against David. He's a warrior, after all, right? Yes, Lisa.
One of the people I read said it also cut them off from a valley. I guess they wanted access to put that wall up.
The Millo?
From an area that they wanted access to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the mill. I don't know the mill. When the stuff I read about the Millo was, it was a defensive wall that was torn down, and it had multiple walls. There were actually several of them. It was really a fortified thing.
They kind of questioned whether it was torn down or whether it was just completing the wall around Jerusalem.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know.
Yeah, but they may have felt like they wanted access to some of that.
Yeah, well, there's a valley that was.
So it felt like something was taken away other than just their own freedom. Gary.
When you said Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, that's what it said. He was a mighty man of valor.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of it. From there, he's put over this very menial.
Okay.
Because I looked up that word Milo. I actually didn't know exactly what it meant. And well, my Bible actually on the bottom says it was a landfill. So landfills were not the most beautiful places of the city. And that was a part, that's one thing mentioned that was built as well as other repairs, I guess. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for making that point. I was wondering if that might have been it. Because the writer says things for a reason. He's a mighty man of valor. And every time you read that, you think this person needs to be respected in that vein. Like David, even though some of the men that David brought on with themselves were unscrupulous a lot of times, they were men of valor. In other words, they were willing to fight. They put their lives on the line. They were dedicated in those sorts of situations, except maybe Joab. But that would put you in a higher state of estate culturally, among the people. That this guy's great. He'll fight for you. And then what does he need to do? Well, you go take care of these people who are doing all these menial tasks. So it may have been an insult. That kind of passed my mind, and I tend to agree with that was one of the things that was making him unhappy about all that. Anybody else? Okay, so I went through several iterations of what I thought about this question, question 8. Ahijah speaks of giving Jeroboam 10 tribes and the house of David 1 tribe. Since there are 12 tribes, how do we account for the other tribe? Sue.
It's just my understanding that since Simeon was within the tribe of Judah, they just kind of became one, even though it was still 2.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to get to that again in this next chapter. That was my first thought. Yes.
Jesus Christ. That's the way I understood it. I could be wrong.
When you get to chapter 12, Benjamin becomes part of Judah until they get taken away. So, and in fact, when Paul talks about his lineage, he's more than proud to say, I'm a Benjamite. Because that's saying something. I'm not one of those Samaritan people. I'm not a Samaritan. I'm not a Samaritan. That's basically what that's saying. I'm part of what Judah did with God, and I was faithful. Our tribe was faithful. Yes, Ida.
I don't think it has to do so much with the individual tribe itself, the ethnic makeup. It's the land.
Okay.
Because remember, the Levites didn't have any land except for the cities.
Okay.
They're not counted.
Yeah. Yes. So Ida's saying it's maybe not so much about tribes as it is about land. And I do have a map here. I have that map there. And good luck reading the whole thing. But maybe we can back up a little bit. You could, wow, this one's better. This one shows the 12 tribes. I don't expect anybody to do anything about it. But you have 12 tribes, right? And one tribe gets 2 inheritances. One on the east, that's Manasseh, right? One on the west side of the Jordan. And I think by the time we get to here, when God is telling David, you're going to get one tribe, Simeon, yes, was assimilated. When we look at Judges, they're assimilated into Judah. Their numbers were greatly reduced during, the supposition is that they were greatly reduced because they were aligning themselves with Korah in the rebellion. And they went from 59,000 to 20,000. So there were very few of them. And then even more so when you look at Genesis 34, I think it is, Simeon and Levi are part of the killing of the Shechemites. And Jacob is so upset. Now, listen, remember, I'm sorry, this is so much history, but Jacob was still a nomad, and he was traveling around like what Abraham did. Abraham had a good name among all the people, even the people that didn't like him could not say or do anything against him because he was such a good nomadic sort of guy. He helped everybody. If he was on your land, you were glad he was there. Well, Jacob starts doing that, and one of the Shechemites takes one of the daughters, and the brothers are very upset. And Simeon and Levi go in, and the guy says, well, how about if I just marry her? And they say, yeah, okay. You just have to be circumcised. So they circumcised all the men, and then after 3 days, they came in and wiped all the men out. And that is a horrible thing to do if you're a nomad and you're roaming around the countryside. That's going to get out to everybody. And Jacob was so upset. He actually curses what's going to happen to Simeon. He says, you're going to be divided. You're going to be scattered throughout Israel. And this is what we're seeing here. I think by this time that had probably happened so much that it was difficult to say Simeon is here, although they were in the land of Judah for the most part. So after saying all that, when we get to chapter 12, we're going to see that Benjamin aligns with Judah. So there's 2 tribes. So what are the other 10 tribes? Well, the other 10 tribes would be the 10 tribes that are shown by landmass, by inheritance, right? Because that's the God-given part of it, is the landmass. And that's the only way I can reconcile that, is you have these basically 13 tribes. One of them doesn't get anything because they're getting cities. One of them is assimilated, and yet you still have these 10 tribes that One of them is given to Rehoboam, and that is Benjamin. Benjamin is given to them. That's what we find in the next chapter. Lisa, did you have something?
Along with what I was saying, being the land, basically, and not necessarily the tribes. One person said that 10 was kind of symbolic of a completeness. And at this point forward, we don't really think in terms of the tribes, we think of Judah and Israel. So we have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So that was just something, I read that somebody had written it, was more of a, it could have been more of a symbolic.
Okay, so 10 being that perfect number.
So it's something that was separated and made complete.
Okay. Good. Anybody else? Okay, sorry for the history thing, but sometimes I put things up on the blog part of it, of all the notes I get, and I just put it up, and then all of a sudden I'm rereading, and then I'm looking, and I'm going, okay, I need to rewrite all this, and that's what happened to me on that one. But all of these things are happening, and the writer doesn't bother to tell us, oh, here's why I'm saying there's 10, This is something we have to look into. Okay, so anybody else on chapter 11? Yes, Ida.
I find it interesting that history repeats itself. Saul was going after David,
Mhm.
and Solomon goes after Jeroboam.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that is, why is my question, was why did Solomon go after Jeroboam? Well, he obviously heard, or somebody told him, or something happened that he understood that Jeroboam was going to get this inheritance, or maybe he was doing something else in his rebellion. Whatever it was, he was going after Jeroboam. And there's just a lot of things that we're not told, and a lot of nuances in the language itself that are, that we will miss if we don't dig a lot. Yes, Lisa.
There's no anointing in Jeroboam. He's not anointed.
Okay.
Kind of interesting.
That is interesting. I didn't think about that. Because this is God's doing. God is the one who chooses him. And he makes it, I don't know if he knows that, And the interesting part about it is nothing has changed as far as God dealing with us even today. I mean, we have the Christ and, Ida, I'm sorry.
It might not be that important, but
I'm sure it is.
God's dealing in this whole time it's so fascinating. And, Solomon had these enemies, and he had people that weren't like, if it was his father-in-law, it could have been a different Pharaoh.
Yeah, it could have been a
If it was
different
his
Pharaoh.
father-in-law, it's not very nice to take someone into your household against your son-in-law.
Yeah.
But he had all these things that could have gone wrong with his reign. And even Jeroboam, who God raised up for this. But because he promised Solomon, or David.
David, yes.
Because he promised David, this didn't bother him during his reign. It wasn't until after. And it just shows how
That's mercy.
honorable God is.
Yes, that's mercy, isn't it? Yeah, I think, that's a good point. God would have been well justified to do to Solomon whatever he thought was necessary to eradicate the idolatry or whatever. You're absolutely right. It would have been well within he would have been well justified to do that. But he didn't, and that's a great point. He's really showing his mercy towards Solomon at this point. Patience. Lisa.
That just went to show that Solomon had every opportunity to repent.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to Solomon. Maybe he just had so much greatness he got tired. This is Solomon. I don't know what happened. I think it's a good lesson for everybody, right? That we can have a lot of great things, but great things don't lead us to God. If anything, they can lead us away from God. Yeah. Okay, so here's chapter 12, and everybody knows what happens in chapter 12. In the last part of chapter 11, we see Solomon pass away. He slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of his father David. And his son, Rehoboam, reigned in his place. Okay, verses 1 through 15, Rehoboam goes to Shechem. And Shechem is just north. Now, he's not in Jerusalem. For me, I just, you read it, then you start looking at it, and things change. Okay, he's not in Jerusalem, okay? He confers with the heads of the clans, including Jeroboam, or the tribes. The people they're going to ask for some relief. He takes 3 days to consider it. He confers with his elders and his young friends. And he takes the advice of his young friends. So let's read through that, verses 1 through 15. Then Rehoboam went to Shechem, and all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. Now when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, he was living in Egypt, for he was yet in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon. Then they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, so this is a great opportunity for Rehoboam, right? Your father made our yoke hard. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. Then he said to them, depart for 3 days, then return to me. So the people departed. King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who had served his father Solomon while he was still alive, saying, how do you counsel me to answer this people? They spoke to him, saying, if you will be a servant to this people. Now there's a forecast of the Christ, yes? To this people today, and will serve them and grant them their petition and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he forsook the counsel of the elders which they had given him, and consulted with the young men who grew up with him and served him. So he said to them, what counsel do you give, that we may answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? The young men who grew up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you shall say to this people who spoke to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, now make it lighter for us. But you will speak to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. Whereas my father loaded you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. Then Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, return to me on the 3rd day. The king answered the people harshly, for he forsook the advice of the elders which they had given him, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for it was a turn of events from the Lord, that he might establish his word, which the Lord spoke through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Okay, so the basic questions are concerning the foolishness of Rehoboam, what lesson does Solomon teach us in Ecclesiastes? And I don't know if anybody read that. I'm going to go ahead and read that really quick. He says, so then I hated my life, because the work that is done under the sun is evil to me, for all is vanity and striving after wind. Yes, I, a laborer, hated all my labor under the sun, that I must leave it to the man after me. And who knows if he will be wise or a fool? Yet he shall rule among all my labor in which I labored, and acted wisely under the sun. This is also vanity. And I turn to make my heart despair over all the labor which I labored under the sun. When there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, and with knowledge, and with advantage, yet he shall give it to a man who has not labored with it for his share. This also is vanity and a great evil. So, is Solomon forecasting here? Is he looking at his son, and what is he saying?
This happens to everyone.
This happens to everyone. Yeah, when I look at it, he's basically saying, I'm doing all this great work, and he's thinking about death, right? He knows he's going to die, and he's like, and the next guy who gets it is going to do what with whatever, we've built. And it's just all his vanity. It's like you can't take it with you, and the next guy after you might not do so well. I don't know if he was specifically looking at Rehoboam thinking these things. Oh, that Rehoboam, I don't know. He doesn't seem to be able to grasp things. My bigger question as far as reading this was, well, here's the question. What may be the reasons? What kind of character is Rehoboam that a leader would use these sorts of authoritarian methods over people who are entrusted to him? So these people are entrusted to Rehoboam. What is his character that he thinks this is okay? What is he thinking? Anybody? Gary?
Seems to be more selfish than to try to be a helper to the people. It uses the word servant. A good leader really is a servant. Even our politicians try to explain that. Vote for me, I'm for the people.
Yeah, that's what they say anyway.
But a good leader, yeah, a real good leader is.
Yes.
Instead of just for himself.
Yeah, I think Jesus epitomized that. And he even said so. Look, I didn't come here to rule over you. I'm your servant. There's the example. Lisa?
Oh, I lost it.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Rehoboam, said someone that Rehoboam's the only son mentioned. I wasn't sure that was quite true. Out of hundreds of wives,
Yeah.
Rehoboam was the only one that spoke. But it seemed like the Egyptian wife had a child that was mentioned, but I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he had lots of children. I didn't get to the bottom of the order of things or how many children he had.
There's no, like with David, there was all the sons and there was that controversy between the sons where it seems like here there's no controversy. Rehoboam is the one taking over the
Okay.
Solomon.
All right.
Doesn't seem like it. And it didn't say there was no other children, so no other children were mentioned, by name. So, if Rehoboam is going to be handed this kingdom, and a lot of people say just the lifestyle of Solomon produced Rehoboam.
Okay, say that again.
The lifestyle of Solomon produced Rehoboam.
Okay, did the lifestyle of Solomon produce Rehoboam? Now, we always look to Ezekiel, who says, the sins of the father will not be born, on the son, or vice versa.
Well, we know that doesn't necessarily go on because Josiah's father was.
That goes,
Manasseh, and
yeah.
that's both ways.
Parental influence is a thing. And everybody who becomes a parent understands the depth of what that means, right? I mean,
They say the child either follows the parent or goes the opposite way.
okay,
So it's,
train up a child.
but it's, yeah. But this lifestyle, that Solomon had
Yeah.
So he really just wanted to hear what he wanted to hear.
Right, thanks for saying that. Yeah, when you read that text, you can see the cogs moving in his brain. He hears what the elders say, and then he rejects it. And then he goes somewhere where he's going to hear what he wants to hear. I'll go talk to my buddies over here and see what they have to say. They had no, they're just as friends. And I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having friends, but obviously they didn't have that wisdom.
Well, they have the same experience he had. They were the same mindset, where taking advice from someone who might have a different opinion or a different mindset, you see where that runs into problems when you never take anybody else's
Okay.
word into consideration.
So if Rehoboam is being affected by the hypocrisy of his own dad, what does that tell us? Don't be a hypocrite. And that's something, again, and I always try to iterate, that God provides a way of redemption. And you said it earlier, that Solomon had all the opportunity to not do this. His idolatry, we read it and it looks like all of a sudden it happened. It didn't all of a sudden happen. It was this thing. And I think about Joseph and his faith. And for me, it forces me to think about, well, what was being said in the house? What did he see in his parents or whatever that helped him gain that faith? Where he's saying, all of this happened because God did it. He had this kind of great faith. And we already know faith comes by hearing it, hearing the word of God. And so, I look at Joseph's life and I say, well, somebody was doing something, somebody was telling him these things. And then you see Rehoboam over here, and we kind of have to look at the environmental part of it, the whole, well, Dad has 1,000 wives, where do I fit in all of this, So, anyway. So yeah, he's selfish. He just wants to do what he thinks he's going to get more. There's a sense of arrogance that because his dad probably, Solomon probably made it look easy. Everything was peaceful, relatively peaceful. And he had influence over all of these and allies over all the surrounding nations. And Rehoboam just walks into it and thinks, okay, I'm the boss now. We've even had politicians here who, in their freshman year, act like they're going to wield this power against people. It's like, well, wait a minute, our government doesn't work that way. You work for us. And this was the advice given to Rehoboam. Okay, anything else? Anything we want to add? Okay, I think we're going to end it there. We'll pick up next week in verses 16 through 24.